Halloween! So I thought I would dress up for the occasion. Yes, this is a costume. So I'm not making anything too scary today, but I am making some delicious pumpkin nut bread. It's a traditional recipe with a couple of healthy additions to it. So let's get started and I'll show you the recipe. The first thing I'll do is prepare my pan. I'm using a 9x5 loaf pan, and this is a stoneware pan. And I think that it's an old pan that I got a long time ago from Pampered Chef. So to prepare it, I'm going to coat it with some shortening. And I'm also going to put a piece of parchment paper in the very bottom. And I'll start by cutting my parchment paper. And I just have a piece, and I'll just go ahead and put it in the pan and crease it along the edge, if you can see that, just to give me an idea where to cut it, because I only want to cover the very bottom of the pan. So then I'll go ahead and cut it. So that looks good, and then I will crease it right there. A little jagged, but that'll do. Now I'll coat it with my shortening. And even though I'm putting the parchment in the bottom, I'm still gonna put some shortening around the bottom as well. Oops, I don't want to get my witch hair in there. And I'm just using a paper towel. That seems to work well for me. Get it nice and coated. You can use Pam spray for this as well. I just don't happen to have any right now. And I'll put that right in the bottom. Actually, I'll flip it over. I don't know if you can see that. And that'll just really help when I remove the bread from the pan. The recipe calls for 1 cup of chopped nuts, and today I'm using walnuts. So I always like to toast whatever nuts that I bake with. So I'll just put it under kind of a low medium heat and watch it really carefully. I've showed this on some of my other videos, but it's worth repeating just to really stay right there by the stove because the nuts can burn very, very quickly. So I just toast them until they get fragrant. And I just give them a little stir. Keep my eye on them. They're starting to smell really, really fragrant. And they're getting a little bit browner. So I'm going to go ahead and take them off the heat and just let them set until I'm ready to use them. Now I'll mix my dry ingredients together. You want a pretty large bowl. And here's where the kind of healthy part comes in. For a 1/4 cup of the flour, I know it's not much, but it's something. I'm going to, instead of using a whole cup of flour, I'm going to take my measuring cup, and this is a 1/4 cup right here, and I'll just do half ground up flax seeds and about half of that 1/4 cup ground up chia seeds. And all I've done was I ground those up in my coffee grinder. And so now I'll top that off with flour and then add 1 more cup of flour. So I'm just, again, topping off those seeds, the ground seeds, with my flour. And there's 1 cup. I'll add that to my bowl. And now I'll add 1 more cup of flour. Now I'll add a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I'll add 1 teaspoon each of baking powder and baking soda. And I've pre-measured my spices into my little bowl. And you'll want to use a teaspoon of cinnamon, a 1/2 teaspoon each of nutmeg and ginger, and then a 1/4 teaspoon of cloves. And I'll dump those right in there. Now I'll whisk all my dry ingredients together. That looks good, and now I'll set that aside. Now I'll combine my wet ingredients. I'll start with 2 eggs. And these are kind of small eggs, but I'm still just going to stick with 2. Sometimes I'll increase it to 3. Go ahead and whisk my eggs. Now I'll add my butter and my oil. I have a half a stick of butter, 1/4 cup that I've melted and cooled. I'll add some oil to that. Today I'm using this avocado oil and I'm getting really low on it. And I'll just top it off to a half a cup. I'll add that to my eggs. Now I'll add my pumpkin. It's just a 15-ounce can of pumpkin. And I always like to use my rubber spatula for this, so you can get most of that pumpkin out of there. Now I'll add my vanilla. And I'm using 2 teaspoons of vanilla today. Add that right in there. I'll add a half a cup of packed brown sugar. And I just use the bag to really pack it in there. Push it firmly down. Give it a whack. And I'll add a half a cup of granulated sugar. I'll use my whisk again. And whisk all that together. And even though the sugar is technically a dry ingredient, I always add my sugar to the liquids so it'll dissolve in the liquids. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now I'll add my wet pumpkin ingredients. And I'm going to fold it into my flour mixture. Again, using my rubber spatula. And I'm just going to fold it together. You don't want to overmix it. I'll try to keep my flour in the bowl. Okay, that looks good. There's still some dry spots, but that's okay because I still have to add 2 more ingredients. Now I'm ready to add my toasted walnuts. I'm just going to dump them right in there. And I'll add my raisins. It's about 1/4 cup. That looks good. Now I'm ready to put it in the pan. I have my pan all prepared with the parchment paper in the bottom. And I did want to mention that this is a pretty thick batter. And I'll smooth the top. Now today I'm going to top this before I pop it in the oven with a mixture of 1 tablespoon of sugar and 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. I don't always do this, but I wanted to do something a little different, so I'll just sprinkle. I'm not going to use all of it, but that's the ratio to make it. And this just adds a nice little crunch to the top of the bread. Okay, that's how it looks, and I'm ready to pop it in the oven. Okay, it baked for a full hour. Now I'll let it rest in the pan for 10 minutes. It's been cooling in the pan for 10 minutes. It's still a little warm. I'll run my knife all around the edge. Now I'll take it out of the pan and place it on this wire rack. Try not to burn myself. There's the parchment paper. Just take that off. And I'll let that cool for a complete hour before I try to slice it. So there you have it, an easy, delicious recipe for pumpkin bread. I'll have the full recipe for you at the end of this video. Happy Halloween, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.